Alright, what is up guys, it is Storm back here with another video, and in this one I am bringing you part 17 to the New Dawn, a Naruto slash Boruto story. But before the video begins, if you like the content you're seeing, be sure to subscribe, like, and comment. I mean, they're all free, so why not? If you want some dope channel merch, the link that'll be down in the description below, and if you want to see more of me, go check out my other channels and go follow me on Twitter and Instagram, which will all be linked down below. But without further ado, why don't we just dive right on in. Boruto idly watched as several new members to the company danced drunkenly on one of the bar tables. It wobbled unsteadily, threatening to throw them off, but through some form of drunken debauchery, their footing held. They were singing some kind of folk song from the land of Frost, their home, but Boruto didn't understand what it was about. Something to do with the finest ale coming from a tavern called the Green Dragon. They were all celebrating the completion of a job well done. For the past few weeks, every man and woman who wore a crimson headband had been running an operation in the Land of Lightning to reduce the influence one of the Lightning Lord's court members held. It was easy, well-paid work, the best kind. Not for the first time, Boruto wondered why the Crimson Tide spent so much of their money in booze. Itachi seemed to take any excuse to dock and get the entire company drunk off their asses, for no other reason than because they had the money. If they had saved or invested their profits, Boruto had no doubt they would all be very rich. As was the case, Boruto was one of the very few who cared to think for the future. Takeo had grown disenfranchised with the mercenary life after the death of Hiroki some years ago, and began to save, probably for retirement. Boruto didn't know what Akari did with her share of the profits, but she certainly never indulged in anything obvious. Boruto closed his eyes, allowing his focus to shift inwards as he continued to mold his chakra into the familiar warmth he came to associate with the yang element. The scroll had never told him why, exactly, he needed to practice creating yang chakra, but it hadn't led him astray so far, so he continued to dutifully practice. "You're doing it again," Hikari said. The corners of Boruto's mouth turned ever so slightly upwards. "The scroll said I needed to continue the training," Boruto countered. Hikari made a disbelieving, frustrated noise. She still didn't believe the scroll actually said anything. As it was, anything related to his training and sales was treated as a practical joke told at her expense. It continued to be a source of amusement for Boruto. Boruto cracked open his eyes as he felt the hair on the back of his neck rise. A moment later, a hand struck him in the back several times with enough force to make him wince. Eiji's booming laughter made his ears hurt as their illustrious leader appeared behind him. "Kid, you gotta see this," Eiji yelled, pulling him to his feet. Boruto wrinkled his nose at the heavy scent of alcohol. Eiji dragged Boruto over to several of the newer ninjas they had recruited some months back, two of which were from Cloud. It was those two that Boruto found sitting in a dark corner of the bar, facing each other, with their friends looming over them and snickering. They had lightning arcing between their fingers, and every so often, it would arc out and zap one of their friends that were watching them, prompting them to yelp. "They've been trying to figure out the armor," Eiji whispered to Boruto. Most anyone with lightning affinity did, once they saw Eiji use it. Ha, all they managed to do is shock the shit out of each other though. Boruto winced as Eiji laughed loudly. Boruto watched as the two former Cloud ninjas focused intensely on their fingers, trying in vain to accomplish what he had already mastered. Their chakra fluctuated wildly, and every so often electricity would lash out. To be fair, it was harder than it looked. "That's it!" Boruto heard one of the men shout. He stood, gripped his wrist with his left hand, and his chakra flared. An arc of lightning shot from his hand and electrocuted his friend, causing him to yelp in pain. The man bellowed and dove over the table, tackling him and starting a brawl. Boruto laughed a little at their expense. Honestly, they would have a better chance of performing the technique if they were sober, but telling mercenaries not to drink was like telling the rain to not be wet. It just wasn't done. The door of the bar opened and was slammed into the rickety walls of the bar, courtesy of the raging wind outside. A handful of cloaked figures entered the bar, soaked and shivering. A waitress herded them to an empty table. "Another round of drinks on me," Eiji boomed. A round of applause went up. "Including our new friends," Eiji said, raising his mug to the new arrivals. The men nodded in thanks. "So," Eiji said conversationally as he staggered to a nearby table, "you made up your mind yet?" "Ah yes, the reason Boruto hadn't wanted to get drunk in a small bar with their leader. He had decisions to make, and he didn't want to make them. His 3 years were almost up. No, Not yet, Boruto said. That's too bad, Eiji commented. Could always stay with us, you know. We could use a man like you running things. Takes more than me and Akari to keep these idiots in line. As tempting as that sounded, the Crimson Tide had outlived their purpose. Boruto had learned all he could from them. New water and lightning techniques, urban stealth, tracking, and taijutsu being the least of all. He made enough money to be able to live comfortably, no matter what he chose to do. Most valuable of all, however, was experience. He had not only learned techniques, he had learned how, and most importantly, when to apply them. Something his friends back in the Leaf wouldn't have. At the thought of the Leaf, Boruto frowned. He felt the twinge of longing in his heart for his home after being so long away. He missed his friends and his family, and as much as Eiji wanted him to stay, and as much as he feared going back to the Leaf, Boruto knew the choice was already made for him. Given the chance, he would go home. It didn't make telling his new friends any easier. Boruto would miss having Akari as his stoic partner in missions. He would miss Takeo and his brooding and irritable temper, and, in some small way, he would miss Eiji and his annoying booming laughter. It grew on you somehow. Boruto sighed and sat down at his and Akari's table as Eiji danced back and forth between the tables, checking on his men. Boruto picked up his cup to take a drink, but faltered as he saw Hikari over the rim. Her eyes were trained on the cloaked men that had entered the bar. Cold, calculating, clinical. Boruto had been on enough missions with her to know what that meant. Threats. He held his cup to his mouth, allowing the liquid to touch but not pass his lips, and sat the cup back down. Boruto shared a barely imperceptible nod with Hikari, and allowed his eyes to fade from blue to white. His Byakugan immediately focused on what they had under their cloaks. Short swords, leather pouches filled with shuriken and kunai, and above all, masks. Porcelain masks with 3 slits, 1 for the mouth and 2 for the eyes. Mist anbu, hunter ninjas. Boruto raised his cup, again pretending to take a sip. With his index finger, he tapped his cheek several times. Hikari's eyes widened ever so slightly as realization dawned upon her. They wore the same mask as she herself did. Before either of them could do anything, one of the mercenaries, a common thug, staggered over to the anbu's table. He stumbled, tripping of his own gangly limbs, and fell to the floor. As he did so, his arm flailed out, grabbing the only thing it could, the man's cloak. The fabric fell to the ground, exposing the man's anbu mask for the entire bar to see. Naturally, everyone wanted to see what the commotion was. Even drunk, the mercenaries' instincts didn't allow their eyes to pass over the hunter ninja mask. The bar was as silent as the grave. Then, it wasn't. Shouts of alarm went up as the Crimson Tide collectively jumped to their feet, drawing whatever weapons they had. In a flash, the mist anbu had donned their masks. One of them blew a whistle, the sound of which was too high in pitch for Boruto to hear. His comrades darted forward, hurling throwing needles and shuriken at the first man to get in their way. Boruto weaved a single seal and inhaled. He spat a lance of water that collided with the anbu that had used the whistle, cracking his mask, and knocking him unconscious as his skull bounced off the wall. All around him, chaos erupted. The door was kicked in, revealing more anbu. Through the windows leapt more masked men, this time bearing the distinctive masks of the Cloud anbu. A joint operation, Boruto realized. Mist and Cloud working together against a common enemy. Them. Boruto threw a shuriken at an anbu that had one of the mercenaries pinned, catching him in the ribs. The distraction allowed his ally to throw his attacker off. Boruto turned, narrowly dodging the swing of a sword as a Cloud anbu attempted to cut him to ribbons. He ignored the anbu, who hadn't realized that one of Hikari's needle was lodged in his shoulder. The anbu collapsed in a heap of limbs after a few moments. Darting forward, Boruto found the nearest anbu and began a dance of gentle fist strikes that left the man a boneless pile of whimpering flesh on the floor. 3 more stepped forward, enraged by their comrade's demise. Boruto dispatched 2 of them in the same manner. The third rushed him, sword outstretched. He was tackled to the ground by a hulking Takeo, who bodily hurled the masked man through the wall of the bar and into the raging wind and rain outside. Boruto and Takeo shared a nod of wordless agreement as the two settled into a defensive formation. Takeo was the heavy hitter, Boruto was the cleanup. Anbu rushed them in droves, falling to Takeo's rugged Cloud Taijutsu and brute strength. Those that didn't were dispatched by a gentle prod to their vital chakra points by Boruto. And still, more came. Anbu veritably flooded the bar. Everywhere Boruto looked, he saw nothing but masked men and women battling the Crimson Tide. They were heavily outnumbered, 2 or 3 anbu per mercenary. It was a battle they were quickly losing. Boruto leapt away as Takeo roared, "Liger Bomb!" The anbu he slammed in the ground was reduced to nothing but a fine, meaty pulp. The planks of the floor shattered, exploding in splinters. The anbu took notice of the threat amongst their ranks, turning and swarming Takeo. Boruto was a whirlwind of open palms and pointed fingers as he struck down as many as humanly possible with the gentle fist. That was when the fire started. One of the mercenaries, helplessly outmatched and outmanned, panicked, and exhaled a hasty fire jutsu. He incinerated his foes, but set the bar ablaze. His actions undid the dam, and the battle erupted in earnest as both sides began using jutsu. One of the Mist Hunter ninjas exhaled a great wave of water that extinguished the fire, and collapsed one wall of the bar. "Everyone out!" Eiji yelled, as the other walls began to give way. The entire establishment was coming down around them. "Takeo, make a door!" Boruto yelled over the din of combat. The larger man bellowed a battle cry and charged the nearest group of anbu, knocking them out of the way and crashing through the wall. Boruto was right behind him, slipping out into the weather through the makeshift door. Men and women spilled out after them, desperate to get out of the building before it collapsed and crushed them. Even as they fled, anbu and mercenary continued to kill one another. Boruto hurled several handfuls of shuriken at the masked ninja as they filtered out, trying to thin their numbers. It did little good. "Boruto!" Takeo yelled in panic. Boruto ducked on pure instinct. A sword sailed through the air, right where his neck would have been. He braced himself with his hand on the ground, and kicked backwards violently. He was rewarded with a muffled grunt as his boot connected solidly with his attacker's ribs. Boruto turned and swiped at the swordsman with his palm. The man, strangely unmasked, jumped out of the way before he could be hit. Takeo was not faring any better. His opponent was also unmasked, a blonde woman dressed in a low-cut shirt with the largest breast Boruto had ever seen. Her sword was a blur of silver as Takeo ducked and weaved to avoid being cut to ribbons. Most disturbing, Boruto noted, was that both the man and woman had the same unstylish bowl cuts. "You're pretty good, kid," the man said, brandishing his sword. "What's your name?" "I'm Atsui," he introduced himself. Boruto didn't waste his breath. Talking only ever got you killed. There wasn't any point in speaking with a dead man anyway. He darted forward, raining down blow upon blow. Atsui countered with an impressive combination of taijutsu and swordsmanship that threatened to shred Boruto's jacket. Boruto grunted as his palm struck the flat of Atsui's sword. The blonde man smirked as his sword was coated in chakra, then set ablaze. Boruto hastily withdrew his hand before it could be burnt. Cloud style, flame beheading. A wall of orange red fire rushed forward. Had the man not shouted his attack like a belligerent idiot, Boruto never would have been able to ready his water jutsu in time. As it was, Boruto exhaled a wave of water that turned to steam upon contacting the flames. Temporarily shrouded by the steam, Boruto created a shadow clone. The clone sprinted forward, a kunai drawn and brandished. Atsui and the clone exchanged blows as Boruto circled them in the steam. The clone yelled in pain, only for its voice to be cut short as it exploded into smoke. Boruto saw Atsui stiffen as he realized he had been fighting a clone. He lunged and sent the lance of chakra tearing through the man's back. Boruto's world exploded in light and heat as Atsui turned to fire. He had not been the only one to make a clone with the distraction of the steam. Biting his tongue to suppress a whimper at his burnt arm, Boruto activated his Byakugan. He couldn't afford to go easy on Atsui, even if it would expose his identity. Atsui appeared behind him, the steam having cleared. Boruto ducked and saw the man's eyes widen in surprise. He had silently attacked from his blind spot, and had expected the sneak attack to work. It didn't. Boruto turned on the man, fully intending to utterly destroy him with a gentle fist now that he had the aid of the Byakugan. Boruto faltered as he heard and saw Takeo scream in pain. The blonde woman had cut his right arm off from the elbow down. Boruto leapt, a blur with his advanced body flicker, chakra coalescing in his right hand as he prepared to save his comrade. There was a blur of black as a man with dark skin and milky white hair appeared between them and the woman. He caught Boruto's still forming Rasengan with the edge of his sword, a mistake as it shredded the weapon, but he did put a halt to Boruto's charge. Takeo's head rolled in the ground as the blonde woman decapitated him with a single swing of her sword. Boruto made a strangled noise in the back of his throat as Takeo died. He was forced back into the prison as Atsui attempted to cut him down from behind. A small, imperceptible arc of lightning jumped up Boruto's right arm, across his chest, and down his left leg. Faster than the eye could follow, he leapt out of the way. The dark-skinned man was forced to leap backward as Atsui's sword cut his shirt, drawing a thin line of blood. Neither had expected him to be so fast. "You okay, Amoy?" Boruto heard the blonde woman ask. "I'm fine, Samui," the dark-skinned man, Amoy responded. Names to faces. Boruto recognized Samui and Amoy from the bingo book. Amoy, in particular, was worth a small fortune as the Raikage's bodyguard. It was of little reassurance. Boruto now faced 3 skilled deadly enemies. A hail of needles forced all 3 cloud ninjas to jump backwards. Hikari appeared beside Boruto, her military fatigues torn and cut in several places. She was breathing hard, and Boruto could see that her chakra reserves were running low. Eiji appeared behind the 2 of them, back to back. A thin sheen of chakra coating his body as electricity danced across his skin. Boruto scanned the surrounding area with his Byakugan. Everyone was dead or dying, except for the 3 of them. He swallowed nervously. "Doesn't this kid look like Naruto?" the woman Samui asked. Boruto didn't want to let them recognize him. He weaved hand seals and inhaled. A moment later, he spat a wave of water forth. Lightning danced from Eiji's hands, electrifying the water. Samui, Amoy, and Atsui all leapt to the safety of the trees as the water swept past them. Atsui exhaled fire, and Amoy shot lightning from his fingertips. Boruto and Hikari dodged, whilst Eiji darted forward with his enhanced speed. Atsui raised his sword to block, the flat of his blade catching the punch. He was sent bodily careening into a nearby tree. "Run!" Eiji commanded them. Boruto turned and was about to leap back into the fray when Eiji's voice stopped him. "Look around, fool. There's too many. Run!" Boruto cast a glance in every direction. Whilst the Crimson Tide's forces had been decimated, there were still tens of anbu remaining. The odds were against them. Boruto stepped forward, his chakra flaring as it began to pour out of his chakra points. Hikari gripped his shoulder painfully tight. "That was an order, Boruto," she hissed, tugging him backwards. "No, we can still win. I've got plenty of chakra left, enough to use a lightning armor to defeat them," Boruto hissed back. Hikari shook her head. "You might have chakra, but we don't. Eiji and I are running on empty. Can you defeat those 3 and all the anbu on your own?" Hikari asked pointedly. Boruto grit his teeth. He couldn't. Not at his level. Not yet. A bolt of lightning tore through the forest, and anbu was left in a smoking crater, dead. "Go!" Eiji yelled as Samui and Atsui attacked in unison. Hikari made the decision for both of them. She threw the rest of her throwing needles in every direction, not aiming at any one target in particular. The advancing anbu were forced to flee and find cover. She struck Boruto in the solar plexus and threw him over her shoulder before sprinting off into the woods. Half the anbu proceeded to fling Boruto and Hikari, and half remained to help their comrades defeat Eiji. The last thing Boruto heard as his vision faded to black was the din of metal striking metal and the roar of a cloud-style kenjutsu. Boruto's eyes fluttered as they opened to darkness. He groaned as his body came back to life, stiff and sore from lying in what felt like solid stone. Blinking, he looked around and saw that he was lying somewhere in a cave. The warm glow of the sun at the entrance told him it couldn't be more than a few hours after noon. Memories came flooding back. The veins in Boruto's temple writhed as his eyes faded from blue to white. His Byakugan scoured the land. The cave he was sleeping in was high in the mountains, overlooking a dense forest of pine trees. A light snow fell, covering the land in white. In the far distance, Boruto could see a sea of fire. Chakra. A small town, barely larger than a village. He didn't recognize the landscape, but the only place with snow during that time of year was the land of frost. "You're awake," Hikari said. Boruto slowly turned to face Hikari. She was leaning against one of the walls of the cave, changing the dressing around one of her arms. It was stained, red. An injury from one of the 3 swordsmen, Boruto assumed. "Where are we?" Boruto asked. "Coast of the land of frost," Hikari answered clinically. "We could have fought them," Boruto said tersely. "And died," Hikari added. "I could have taken them," Boruto said. "I had the chakra for the armor and several Rasengans, all you 2. Amoy is the body of the Raikage, and Samui and Atsui were veterans of the 4th War who fought the Gold and Silver Brothers." Hikari cut him off. "You wouldn't have been able to beat them 3 against 1. The 2 of them descended into a tense silence, as Boruto brooded over the loss of his former comrades and teacher. "Don't you feel guilty about leaving Eiji? He's probably dead," Boruto asked. He never did figure out what exactly their relationship was. Hikari was silent for a moment before answering. "I was an orphan. growing up in the Hidden Mist. During my academy years, I showed great potential. The Mist had just restarted recruiting for their anbu program, and I was recruited at age 8. I completed my training at age 11, and was placed on active duty. Our duties primarily consisted of hunting down rogue ninjas who had abandoned the village in the aftermath of the war, Hikari explained. Just after I turned 13, I discovered a file in our base of operations with my name on it. It said my parents were veterans of the war who deserted the village to live a peaceful life. They were some of the first victims of the reformed Hunter Division, she said quietly. The anbu who killed my parents brought me back to the village, Hikari explained, her voice regaining some of her strength. After I learned the truth, I took what I could carry and left the village. They sent hunters after me, former comrades and friends. They would have killed me, but I ran across Itachi in the beginnings of the Crimson Tide. He saved my life, and I've been in his debt ever since. He was the closest thing I had to a father. Boruto frowned as Hikari told her life story. He felt guilty for trying to use Eiji's sacrifice as an argument against their cowardice. I'm sorry, Boruto apologized. It felt wholly underwhelming. Don't be, Hikari said. We were his proteges. Eiji saw enough of his friends perish in the war. It may have been cruel of us to stay and die, making him experience that again. Maybe they didn't kill him. He was the leader after all. They might have taken him alive, Boruto offered. Unlikely, Hikari stated. Hunter protocol states that the bodies of those killed must be destroyed immediately, on site. Eiji was from Cloud, but I doubt they would have spared him. Boruto sighed heavily, leaning back against the wall of the cave. The cold stone helped to clear his mind. He and Hikari sat like that for a time, not moving, not talking. What do we do now? Boruto asked. I don't know, Hikari admitted. What were you planning to do after your 3 years were up? I was gonna go home, Boruto admitted. Do so then, Hikari told him. You could come with me, Boruto offered. Hikari made a small scoffing noise. Immigration between villages is frowned upon and tightly controlled, and I'm wanted, Boruto. It would never work, she said. Where will you go then? Boruto asked. The land of rain, Hikari decided. They're still rebuilding. They won't question the appearance of one more nameless citizen. Boruto frowned and sighed. This was not how he wanted to part with his friends and comrades. All but Hikari were dead, and she was going to disappear in the one country that took all newcomers, and he was going back to the Leaf. What if he didn't like it there? What if they wanted to throw him in jail for leaving the village? What if his dad was mad at him? Worse, what if the village still remembered the way he cheated in the Chunin exams? Suddenly, going back to the Leaf didn't seem like a very good idea. You don't seem too happy about going home, Hikari nodded. Boruto frowned. I'm not, he said, simply. He had explained the manner in which he fled the village in the first place to Hikari and Takeo after he trusted the Crimson Tide. Hikari glanced over at him. A compromise then, she suggested. You go back to the Leaf. I head for the rain. I travel south along the border of the Land of Fire to the Land of Waves. It should take me 2 months if there aren't any obstacles. If you decide not to stay, meet me there. I'll wait a week. If you don't show, I'll continue on. If you do, we can figure it out then. Boruto smirked. You do care, he sing-songed. He got the very distinct impression that Hikari was rolling her eyes underneath her mask. Deal, he agreed. Naruto threw his head back as he drained the last vestiges of broth from his cup of ramen. These days, he didn't even have time to take a break from lunch. His meals consisted of microwaved cup ramen, the less delicious cousin of Ichiraku ramen, but still ramen nonetheless. Discarding the cup, he quickly set back to work, going through the necessary paperwork for the Shinobi Union World Tournament, as they had dubbed it. Of course, as the proposer of the event, Naruto was expected to do the lion's share of the paperwork and host the event. It had actually been a boon for the Leaf, as it was expected the economy would grow rapidly preceding the tournament itself. A brief knock drew Naruto's attention. Entered, he bid. Ah, Hanabi, Naruto greeted his sister-in-law. Hokage, sir, Hanabi said, bowing slightly. At seeing her serious expression, Naruto knew something was amiss. What's wrong? Naruto asked, dreading the answer. To answer his question, she withdrew a small leather-bound book and turned to a marked page. She handed him the book, pointing to it. Naruto instantly recognized it as a bingo book. The marked page was for a rogue ninja dubbed Inazuma, real name unknown. There was no photograph. Naruto began to read through the ninja's description. Wears the headband of the Hidden Eddy. Proficient in water and lightning jutsu. Uses taijutsu similar to that of the Gentle Fist. Taller than average with an athletic build. Blonde hair, blue eyes. 2 birthmarks or scars on both cheeks. Extremely dangerous. He didn't need to read more than that. There was only one person who it could be. Boruto. Naruto skipped to the bottom. Wanted, dead or alive. Hitting cloud. 10 million Rio, Naruto yelled, rising to his feet. It was just distributed this morning, and Nabi informed him. The Hyuga clan receives the newest edition early. Naruto blanched. If the Hyuga clan received the new edition of the bingo book early, that means the door to the Hokage's office was kicked off its hinges as a very thunderous-looking Hiyashi Hyuga stormed into Naruto's office, flanked by 4 Hyuga clansmen. Shikamaru trailed in after them, looking troubled. Hiyashi brandished a copy of the book, casting demanding glances between his youngest daughter and his son-in-law. You will organize a team at once to rescue my grandson and escort him back to the village, Hiyashi commanded. Naruto laughed nervously and scratched the back of his head. He still wasn't very good at interacting with his father-in-law. I'll be contacting Cloud about redacting the bounty, Naruto stated lamely, trying to appease the man. That isn't good enough, Hiyashi declared. I'll form a team of Hyuga trackers and set out immediately. Inform the mist that will be in their territory. Shikamaru suddenly straightened. That won't be necessary, he told Naruto and Hiyashi. Boruto stood on a branch high in the trees surrounding the Hidden Leaf. With his Byakugan, he could see the barrier that surrounded the entirety of the village. An interesting jutsu, to say the least. A combination of a barrier and a seal. From the structure of the sealing language, he could approximately determine its purpose. To monitor each and every person who entered and left the village. Boruto surmised that was the purpose of the small seal built into the back of his headband that he kept sealed in one of the many compartments of the storage seal on his forearm. Ninjas coming and going to be recognized by the seal in their headbands and filtered out, while anyone else was recorded and tracked. Very ingenious. Letting his eyes fade from white to blue, Boruto hopped down from his perch and casually strolled through the front gates of the village. He would have liked to have seen what the barrier did as he crossed the threshold, but it was best to keep a secret, at least for the time being. 2 Chunin stood guard in a small building that functioned as the check-in for all incoming people. They stared at him with clear disbelief, their eyes flickering between his face and a wall that Boruto couldn't see. No doubt it had his missing poster plastered there. He gave them a wave and a smile and greetings. Boruto Uzumaki was home.